Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA USA, which is a little easier to remember. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. And as part of our efforts to promote play, we introduced Porch Play Chats. They started in 2020. There's almost 300 of them that are free to you on our YouTube channel. So if you go to ipausa.org and up in the top right-hand corner, you click on our YouTube channel and subscribe to it, and you friend us, I think it is, on Facebook. Magically, every Monday morning, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm co-president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch is Lindsay Jelski, who is a new co-facilitator. Yay, team. And with us today is Dr. Cathy Ramstetter and Dr. Lauren McNamara. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about both of them. Dr. Cathy Ramstetter is the co-author of the American Academy of Pediatrics Policy on Recess that was first released in 2013 and reaffirmed in 2023, and is currently undergoing a new update. Dr. Ramstetter is also has been a school health consultant since 2008. She has a brand new book coming out in July that she's going to tell you about in a second. She started Successful Healthy Children in 2015 to further her work in assisting schools with wellness initiatives and recess implementation. And her work has always been focused on protecting and promoting daily quality recess for every child all the way through high school. Dr. Lauren McNamara is an educational and developmental research psychologist at, I'm sure I'm going to say this wrong, Ashoka?
Ashoka, correct.
Oh, hey, team. Ashoka Fellow based at Toronto Metropolitan University's Diversity Institute. Lauren has over 25 years of experience working with school boards in the US and Canada, and she's the founder, I love this, of Schoolyards for Thought and Recess Project Canada, which is a collaborative project that she started as part of her program of research on healthy schools. And Cathy's gave me the title of this, which I love, is my recess hero, Laura McNamara, Schoolyards and Tea Time and Recess. And so Cathy's going to sort of tell us how this relationship began and where it's gone. And then Lauren's going to talk to us about her work.
Yes.
So welcome.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Deb, for having me on the porch. It's always fun to be here with you. And Lindsay, thank you for co-facilitating. And Lauren, my recess hero, thank you. I'm going to cry. Thank you for being with us today. So I met Lauren in, I believe it was 2016 or 17. A news article came across my feed that was featuring Lauren's work with the Recess Project Canada at the time. And I remember her line was like, it was something along the lines of, I study recess. I have to always explain and apologize to people for that. But it's
Oh,
the work that I do and it's so important. And I was like, I love this person. That's how I feel. It
mm,
was really hard to own to other academics or even other school personnel that recess was so important. It was the focus of my work. So I was doing wellness work, which was like recess is part of wellness for a long time. And then I met Lauren and I reached out to Lauren and we had a Zoom meeting before Zoom was a thing, even.
ooh,
Lauren
huh?
introduced me to it. And I, Lauren and I were very connected. I can't explain it any other way. I was so inspired by her work. She was recently named an Ashoka Fellow when I met her. And Ashoka Fellows are folks who are really they're like social entrepreneurs making a change in systemic change in through their work. And the Recess Project Canada was about 7 or 8 years old by then. She had published some work on, and I'll let her explain some more about the work, but a very large survey study of principals and students in Canada um, about recess, but more importantly, about the way recess is not always experienced in the same way by children with either special needs or who are missing out on recess or who are excluded by their peers for some reason. So it's, and how even when students experience recess, it may not be a very positive experience. So Lauren's work was to promote recess in a way that would be supportive and inclusive, and in a time when nobody was using those words, supportive and inclusive, really. Um, and it was because of Lauren's work that I really started to think about what it means to not just have recess, but we need to explain what recess needs to look like,
Yeah.
what
Mhm.
that means to have a space and a climate socially that allows children to really be playful. Words that I didn't use before I met Lauren. So,
Wow. Thank you, Kathy.
yeah. So this is my friend, my colleague, my recess hero, Lauren McNamara.
Oh, thank you. Our relationship has always been so delightful because we're like work soulmates, right? You know,
Mhm.
and it's just so it makes me feel so inspired when I look at your work and when we talk and we always find that spot of connection that inspires us even more.
Right.
And yeah, I do remember. I do remember when you first reached out to me, and I thought, how have we never met? And I'd been reading. I mean, that position statement. It was like part of that kind of a, it was always with me.
Yeah.
And it's funny that we hadn't connected up until then, and then the pandemic. That I had felt so much momentum moving up to that spot,
Mhm.
and was so excited about how things were evolving in particular with recess and our research that we were doing. And part of my work was action research so that I couldn't stand the thought of like, I'm doing all of this, but nobody can access my articles. And so I wanted to really work with the teachers, the educators, the principals to find out what is going on, what's making it so sticky that it doesn't seem to want to change as quickly as anything else in the schools. So I was really devastated when the pandemic hit because we couldn't work in schools, we couldn't do it, we just couldn't engage. And so I probably have never felt so alone in the work department. And that's when I reached out to Cathy and said, what can we do? Like the first thing to go is play during the pandemic. And there's got to be something we can do because I feel so helpless right now. And little by little, I mean, there's only a handful of us really that was focusing on recess research at that time. So we literally reached out to everybody. I think at the time was about 12 of us, maybe not even, maybe about 10 of us around the world. And so we just had a meeting and chatted and realized the power that we had in our collaboration that was
Mhm.
global and to share, the wealth and the kinds of things that we were struggling with and how can we do this? And I think that's how, very simply, the Global Recess Alliance had evolved. And um, it's become a thing. It's so nice to watch something come from nothing, and it just becomes this magical group that at any moment we can reach out to one of our colleagues. So I'm super grateful, Kathy, that you invited me here, because I think the more that we can talk about it, uh, the more the information gets out there, and the more the information can disseminate and diffuse, and people start talking about it. And I think once people start talking about it is when the change really starts to happen.
Right.
Yeah, they have to be driven, right, in some way, shape, or form. And if recess was, oh my goodness, we've got to catch these kids up after the pandemic, and then recess, if it had been present before, really disappeared. It, I think people are beginning to see that if we want children to develop in a healthy way, whether it's addressing obesity or addressing um, their mental health, or if it's addressing their ability to think in a in an integrated way instead of just using the cognitive domain. And with the increase in behaviors in classrooms that teachers are struggling with and principals are struggling with, um, I think, and Cathy and I talked about this at our conference in Kentucky, we're at a tipping point, and we're still moving forward, Cathy, with what we were talking about. So we're at a tipping point, and I think this is a good time to start really drilling down and pushing, because I think people are recognizing it more and more that this isn't working. Something's wrong with
Yeah,
our
so
children.
it's, when Lauren talked about, I'm going to back up just a minute to that from that, Deb. When Lauren reached out to me in, I think it was April or late March of 2020, all the schools were on lockdown globally. And Lauren sent this email around. What can we do? When schools reopen, how can we help schools return to quote normal? Which we all thought was going to be in June.
Right. A couple months.
Or something.
Yeah.
But Lauren had attended the IPA World International Play Association
In
Triennial
Glasgow.
Conference in Toronto. Is that right, Lauren? In
Toronto.
Toronto?
Calgary.
Calgary,
In Calgary, yeah.
where you had met Will Massey, Anna Barrison, right? Is that right?
I think it was Anna and Ed Baines.
Ed Baines, yes.
Yeah, those two.
So she knew these people who I had known Anna from long ago, right after the AAP policy statement dropped. Anna and I were guests on WHYY in Philadelphia, their local radio station show about recess in schools. She was talking about her book, Recess Battles in Philadelphia. I was talking about the policy statement, but I never really knew Anna. I knew Ed Baines and Peter Blatchford's work, never knew who he was. I would never have met him if it weren't for Lauren. And so we together reached out to folks. I knew Debbie Ray, Pazzi. Debbie knew Pazzi really well. I knew Olga, and we just kind of brought each other together. And like Lauren said, we now I can pop an email. I can pop a text to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm struggling." But when Lauren talked about her action research, that was the excitement and the inspiring thing that I was working on before when COVID hit. Lauren and I entered in a memorandum of understanding. So I have her surveys of principals and teachers and students. And I used almost every single question the same, except for like they weren't in a provincial school. They were in a school in Cincinnati. And I surveyed the school and I did the students, fourth through eighth grade, and the students were part of it. Their wellness committee was part of it to make changes in recess. Bam, March hit, that research came to a stall.
Oh,
And I remember when Lauren reached out to me, I was like, oh, thank goodness I'm not alone in the world.
yeah.
And it will be 6 years in March. I remember Lauren and Rebecca London and I were on a Zoom, just the three of us in like the middle of May or in the middle of April, end of April in 2020. And we had this statement that was pretty close. And how are we going to publish it? What are we going to do with it? Where is it going to live? And the three of us came up with, I remember I was sitting in my car on my phone on a Zoom, and we came up with the idea of the Global Recess Alliance, and it was a domain that was available.
Wow.
And I bought it and host it under Successful Healthy Children. And it's not super active. I'm not doing I wish I was doing a lot of social media posting. I'm hit or miss. But Lauren's work has continued to evolve. And I was happy to see that in 2025, another work by Lauren and her colleague, Ken Lodo, I'm going to get it wrong, Lauren, Lodowick?
Ken Lodowick, yeah.
Yeah, that your work continues with still addressing the barren landscape and how do we address that. So flipping it back to you, I want you to tell me about Schoolyards for Thought and how that's evolved out of Recess Project Canada.
Yeah, so I think Recess Project Canada, that was the action research project that actually started in 2012, and my university students were a big part of, well, what's the action? Like, what is the action that we're going to do? Because we didn't have any kind of a model to work with. And so, literally asked the principal, can we just, the students are education students and they need volunteer hours. And when I look back, I'm kind of embarrassed that I just didn't, there was nothing, I didn't know what we could possibly do. And I remember the first student's name was Mary, and she went out on the schoolyard. She seemed, a lot of these university students were camp counselors in the summer. So they had sort of a knack with the kids and how to play with the kids and engage the kids. And that first day that she was out there, um, we didn't know what was going to happen at the end of the day. It was like, how'd it go? How'd it go? What did you end up doing? And she said, I don't know. Um, I think we're going to have a problem. And I said, oh no, like what? She said, I had 30 kids surrounding me wanting to play all these games, and it was too much for me. I didn't know how to do it. So can I bring in my colleague, from university? And so it sort of evolved like that. So now there's two of them, and they were sort of just doing what the kids wanted. And a lot of it was just a little bit of scaffolding. Can you just
Mhm.
help us? Like, I think we forget these kids are so little and they're just negotiating the best that they can in this vast open space of 500 kids and really nothing, not a whole lot of variety, not much to do. So I think um, that is how we really evolved and we documented everything that we did. So Mary did this, Julie did this, and we started to document what worked, what didn't work, and it became this book of lessons learned and refining how best to support students, the young students in that space without completely organizing it, without, it's just what do they need? And the kids were incredibly vocal. That was probably the best part of my research was just listening to the kids. Just tell us.
Mhm.
I don't think anybody had done that before. Sit down and
Mhm.
ask them, what do you like about recess? What do you need? How can we support you? And I think just the fact that somebody was asking them that question made them more empowered. And so this went on for a good 10, 12 years. Um, and we had been to hundreds of schools by this point. And Ken and I had done surveys, not just in Ontario, but across Canada with kids as well and principals to try to really get a better picture of what's going on and what the kids need. And I started to realize, back then, especially around 2010, was a lot of like principals were just, or school districts were just cutting out recess altogether. It's just not
Mhm.
that, we need more instructional time. And I think there was that quote about hanging on the monkey bars is not going to increase, test scores. And I was like, okay, so if we're going to advocate to put recess back in schools, this is our opportunity to not continue the same problem because obviously they took it out because it was a problem. It's such a big headache for a lot of principals. And so, can we look at the quality of what's going on out there rather than just put it back in the way it was? Let's use it as an opportunity to change it, to find out what is it that, and it was really interesting to think that nobody had actually thought about that. And so I needed to talk to somebody about that. Um, and so that's just sort of how it evolved. And then Schoolyards for Thought. This is where we're going to lean into the topic of tea time. And Schoolyards for Thought just got me thinking, I want to broaden. It's not so we were supporting the children's social and play and coaching the teachers and leaders on how we might, you know, support everybody in this endeavor. But I kept standing on the schoolyard going, there's nothing here. There's nothing for
Mhm.
them to do. There's literally no direction. It's like I always thought about the built environment. If you see a chair when you walk into a room, the chair kind of tells you, come sit in me, right? These things have messages that invite the kids on what to do. If you've got a whole bunch of tires, the kids know to go and climb on them. And there just wasn't anything telling the kids what to do. And they were telling me there's so much anxiety built in with that
Oh,
because
wow.
they don't know how to navigate the space. And I thought, yes, I remember that as a kid. right? Even if you have one day of teasing or bullying, there's nowhere to go. There's
Mhm.
nowhere you can go. There's nothing else to do. And so I started looking at the space as that's 50% of of the challenge is that we need to focus on that. So I decided I want to change it to more broadly to schoolyards for thought, where recess is also part of that. But it also allows me to focus on the built environment and the interaction between the social and the physical built environment. And so as I talked with my other colleagues about this, I was talking to Brendan Hinman in Australia. He's another member of the Global Recess Alliance. And he says, do you ever think about like the semantics of things? And I was like, oh, actually, I had never explicitly thought about that word semantics, but yes, I know what you mean when we say recess, there's something sewn in, braided in, this history, even when we talk about play, we have all this history that's sort of braided in the word and all those connotations, and those connotations come really quickly to people and they think, oh yeah, and it depends on what they've been through, but um, this it doesn't have this sense of importance um, born into it from 100 years ago. It's sort of trivial, right? And that's what we're working with. We're trying to get to change that. So Brendan was telling me that they have tea time. And I was like, well, sorry, what's tea time? And this is in Australia. And I had images of, little children sitting around drinking tea. And and he said, no, 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 it's the teacher's tea time. And I went, oh, 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 of course.
Mhm.
It's a break for the teachers. This whole thing, when you look at the history of whoever it was that invented recess, this is a break for the teachers. And there really wasn't any design rationale behind what the kids do other than go out and play. And we've got a lot of them. Um, and so, sorry, I lost my train of thought because the dog came in.
Okay. I have cats, Lauren, so I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so tea time kind of made me realize the history behind it, that this is a break for teachers in the same way that recess was actually a break for teachers. And I'd never thought about that,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? And that's why we have the unions protecting them. That's their time. They need a break. Of course they do, right? Everybody needs a break in the workday, but we didn't actually think about the ramifications of the students. What happens when you now have one staff member and 200 kids,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? That changes the whole context. So when we think about terminology like that and the semantics, it helps us unpack like some of the bigger challenges. So if if we want to encourage kids to play and have more unstructured play and all of this, we have all this science behind us, but it's important to look at, well, that 1 to 200, no wonder there's nothing out there. They're terrified, like of liability. What's going to happen? How do you manage that many kids by yourself? What if one gets hurt? You're focused on that child, and there's 199 children who go unsupervised. And so it becomes more of a calamity of, oh my gosh, panic. How do I manage all of this effectively? And so that allows us to kind of get at what's
What
taking
the
so
reason?
long. Like,
Yeah.
why is this harder? And we need more staff. Yes. What kinds of staff and so on. So I love that. I was talking to Cathy about this tea time thing, and she was saying the same thing that Posse had mentioned it when he moved to Australia from Finland. And it just kind of throws us because we've never heard of it.
Right.
And so it allows us explicitly, to kind of explicitly open it up and unpack it, and it makes sense. But if you have been socialized all of your entire childhood through your adult life about this tea time, you sort of have this connotation with it that other people don't have. So it made it easier for us to kind of see how the connotations were attached
Right.
to, and the history that's built in to those
Right.
connotations.
And similar to the way that recess brings up immediately
Hmm.
images, and it's typically a young, early elementary child or early elementary experience. And for some reason, swings and slides show up, swings and,
Hmm.
or maybe kickball. These things are like instantly what you're thinking about. Or it's blacktop with
Nothing.
baby markings
Yeah.
on the ground.
Red Rover was
Yeah.
my favorite.
Or you might not have that positive of an experience. And
Hmm.
I loved how when Lauren shared with me her survey questions, it wasn't just what do you like about recess. She followed that up with what don't you like about recess or what you
Hmm.
don't like about recess. Like she said, and like Bob said previously, like kids will tell you.
Hmm.
And I think that's where some of the really rich understandings that we have neglected this space.
Yeah.
And when we hear it called tea time, we're like, well, of course we neglected it because it wasn't for the kids anyway.
Hmm.
That's just an afterthought that you got to figure out what to do with them while the teachers take the break. Um, it feels like in the United States and Canada when we talk about recess, well, of course they have recess. They know what to do, but we don't give it any thought really. It's still an afterthought in a different way,
Yeah.
Hmm.
right? So,
Well, and I think what was interesting about the tea time, like, woo, how come we've never thought about that? Is that you began to get to the root of the problem with the unions, right? No teachers need a break. So
Yeah.
um, they can't be out on the playground. They need a break. Well, and what's so interesting is that children need a break, and but they need something to do when they're out there, and it doesn't need to be. It was driving me crazy when I think it was right before the pandemic that people were saying, well, all they do is fight out there. So we have to organize. And, they move from one station to another. And I said, that's not recess. And so sometimes it's the definition, just like with play.
Mhm.
We have the definition of play to IPA USA and to IPA World is different than playing with the purpose or intentional play or any of those other terms that people add on to play to make people understand, oh, well, they're actually learning when they're playing there. If you use those terms instead of that's not play if the teacher's choosing. It's only play when children are choosing. And so we have the same definition issue in the early childhood classroom. And so if you then can, with your tea time piece, begin to address those issues with the union and then advocate for materials to be, and they don't have to cost a lot. I mean, we don't need those, I don't know, what are they cost now?
the built
$30,000 play structures or something. It can be so much easier than what people envision because maybe they grew up with play equipment that was the big static structure
Yep.
instead of really jump ropes.
So, and like Lauren, in your work, uh, the video, which you'll have to send to Lindsay, the schoolyards for thought. When you looked at the built environment, that doesn't include any big built structures, right?
No, I mean, one of the things I was learning, and I was learning a lot of this from schoolyard designers and playground designers, was um, a lot of times what happens is the school council will fundraise and say they come up with $100,000, and then the school boards have sort of a list of, two or three, four, five, maybe, of
Mm-hmm.
people who have been, or companies, playground companies that have been vetted. And so you could choose from these five. And so I think what happens is, the school council will go through this catalog and they'll go, oh, that looks neat, that looks neat. And so they'll buy this one structure. It might be, have multiple different types of things within the structure, but it's usually this one sort of whole cohesive playground structure with a slide, maybe, or a pole or climbers or something like that,
Yeah, all the
without any
different.
thought as to the impact because they wouldn't know. It's not their expertise. They wouldn't know that sometimes what happens, you might buy one thing and there's so many kids on that one thing that it actually makes it worse.
Mhm.
And they start fighting, and there's just not enough room. 200 children on one play structure. And I remember walking around with some of the kids. It was like, just give me like just walk me through the schoolyard. Tell me the things that you think about as you walk around. And I remember one little girl, she took me to the play structure, and then you can kind of go under part of the play structure, and she says, "In here is where all the bullying happens." And I was like, oh wow, I just got chills, just and that's how they spoke, was like they had these locations that already had a purpose,
Mhm.
right? That was kind of defined well for all of the kids, and they knew to stay away from there. And so what I started to recognize was you don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Thank you. Yep.
Right. You don't. You need potentially some tires. Like I think you can do it on any kind of a budget. You just need variety and to spread things out. And we know all of the different types of play, right? We've got quiet play, active play, restorative play, all of, the whole list. And if you just think of designing for those different types of play and kind of it spread it out over the whole of the schoolyard. So then you can have loose parts over here, you can have tires and obstacle courses over here, you can have, big group games over here. We've built stages. That's probably the most popular thing is stages. And then the last one we did, they wanted a puppet theater as part of the stage. And I remember thinking, asking the principal, can we do this? Because a big part of supervision is sight lines. You have to be able to see the children. And if we build a puppet theater, they can go right behind that wall. And that's the idea. And they let us do it. And I was like, I love that because the odds are of the kids going behind there and doing something, I don't know what they're going to do, but are very low compared to the odds of the kids wanting to go play puppets.
Yeah.
And, and it's like, I became puzzled by it was all about, no, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this. Because,
Safety.
I mean, the worst one um, was we can't mow the grass around it.
Yeah.
Uh, and, and, it
There won't be
causes
any
trouble
grass. The
for,
children are out there playing.
yeah, it's maintenance for it. But it went deeper than that. And it said if we can't do the edging for the grass, it grows really long. And ticks will climb on the grass, right? And the ticks can jump off onto the children, and the children will get Lyme disease.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
I feel like
And
I hear that.
I was
That's what we
completely,
hear
I didn't
here.
even, it was incredible. I did not know what to say. It's like, really? So I mean, what are the odds of getting Lyme disease from a couple blades of grass compared to
mhm.
the potential of adding so much variety? And so I feel like I'm always trying to explain and convince. And it's like, yes, okay, so we have a weed whacker. We need to trim around those tires. We need to trim, but that's that's just part of it,
That's
right?
it.
That's like saying, yeah, we don't. I've had a lot of principals who say, we had to stop with the equipment because we kept losing it, and I couldn't come up with $2,000 every year to replace it. And then we would go in the gym, and gym class would have just tons and beautiful new equipment that they had. It was locked in there only for
Yeah.
curricular purposes and
Mhm.
nothing in the schoolyard. And then I met some really amazing principals who said, I used to think that way and I stopped caring. I just made it a point of replenishing that equipment every year.
Yep.
That's what it's going to cost. That's my maintenance cost, $2,000 to replace the equipment every school year.
Well, and there's
Which,
two things with that, right? The one is to help kids establish the responsibility for their things.
Yeah.
Right. But things are going to get broken. Things are going to
Yeah.
get lost. If kids are doing kickball, something's going to end up on the ceiling or the roof or something. The balls are there's a maintenance also to any kind of loose parts or equipment games kind of that are portable. But there's also the cost of doing business, right? You replace
Yeah.
paper every year. You
Mhm.
replace, So I
That's a
love
good
that.
point. Yeah.
Oh, we had so when I had started our recess fight here, and then Catherine, I may have told you this or not, we our PTA got involved quickly, and they were willing to set aside. We had three elementary schools. One was pre-K through third, one was K through third, and then the other one was 4 and 5. And our PTA, we decided that we were going to put $300 per school and create like a recess bin because the one school, they were outside every day on the playground. No matter what, they were outside. The school my son was at, never outside, except for really nice days in June. And it would be the last 30 minutes of the day.
Oh,
And then the fourth and fifth graders, they just never experienced it. So we got these recess bins and we had $300 worth of just balls and ropes and chalk and things like that, bubbles, and we put them in there. But then what was happening was nobody was holding the kids responsible for their cleanup time. So the custodian started taking all the stuff and just locking it up. So even though the PTA spent all this money on the supplies, the custodian said they're not cleaning them up. I found a jump rope on the sidewalk. I took it. Now he locked it up in his storage room, and now we just lost all of that access. And that took a whole fight in itself to get them to reopen it, and then to have to put that ownership on the kids and the teachers. Like, okay, here's the stuff to play with, but you do have to take care of it. And flash forward now, those three schools are built into one school. So they're all merged into one building, and we have a $700,000 structure. And they still don't know what to do with it. And then depending
oh,
on the different admin that's in that building at this time, that they've gone through three, I want to say, in 4 years. Yeah, so the different depending on the admin, they're not allowed to share the structures with other classes. There's, if you're K-1, you're only on the K-1 structure. If you're 2 to 5, you're only on that structure. And that's a whole other argument in itself. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like we got it scheduled now, so teachers have scheduled recess in their day, but they're not being allowed to use it the way they need it.
Yeah. I think one of the things I want to say that there's been a lot of principals who are trying to find different ways to manage the equipment, and we don't hear from them. And so I want to sort of bring their voices to the
mhm.
foreground and say, well, this is what they've tried, and this is what they've tried, and this seems to be working really well. So I want to offer one here about the equipment that seems to work really, really well was we have the junior leaders, right? And there's sort of once or twice a week they are responsible for working with kids at recess. We don't want to take them out of their recess too many times a week. So we just say one or two a week for about 12 weeks and then can have that experience, becomes leadership experience on their resumes. But then what happened was the principal was struggling with the equipment. What should we do? And had we put the equipment in each classroom. So say there's skipping ropes. There's a skipping rope area. They have the bin of skipping ropes and things that are
Mhm.
associated with skipping ropes. And that classroom, maybe it's a grade 5 classroom, it's responsible for those skipping ropes. It goes out with them and comes back with them. And
Nice.
that satisfies so many issues because one is storage. There's often no place to put all of this recess equipment. And so by breaking it up and having one classroom, we've got space in the classroom, we've got children who will look after it. And then we have, the longer term maintenance, they know how much is there. So if it, with one is missing, then we can say, oh, one of them broke somehow, or, something like that. So it's there's simple little things that could change the direction of so many schools, but they're not hearing about it. And so that's what I love about talking about it. Just keep talking, share your stories and well, we did this and we did this. And then they go, oh, I never thought about that. And a lot of it is because teachers are on their breaks, right? So this isn't part of their work portfolio. So someone else has to think about it, and it's often the principal who is left with trying to figure all this out. So I think having a platform to talk about what's working, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that are going really well? We need more of that.
More of that. Kathy, did you go on the tours in Glasgow that we did on that Friday?
I did not. I was not
Okay.
able to do that. So,
So we did this when we were in Glasgow at World. I said I really want to see programs, but I really don't want to miss a day at the conference. And so I said, I had done some work before we got there, and Glasgow Adventure Playground, and the Children's Woods, and all of those places said, sure, come, no problem. Anytime on Friday, anytime on Friday that you want to come. And I said, great. And so then I would mention, so I'm going to go visit places on Friday. Do you want to come? And okay. So then that went through the whole conference. And I think we ended up with 35 of us who were going on to each of these places. And we had more and more. So I think we did 5 visits at 5 different programs that were incredible. And I have all the pictures. But the last one that we went to was a before and after school program that was trauma informed. And they were located in a Catholic primary grade school. And so what these wonderful trauma informed people who were responsible for that before and after care did is they got the children all together who might be going to the before and after care, and they'd say, if you could have anything on a playground, what would you want? And so they gave them this enormous amount of wonderful creative ideas. And then the Catholic school had an area that they had never built up that was just like jungle. And so they asked the before and after school care program, went to the Catholic school and said, we'd like to fundraise and then take over that area. And it took them a while to get the Catholic school to be convinced that that was a good thing. But then they went in. So they had it was a jungle back there. So they got volunteers. The volunteers came in. They cleared out everything that was harmful. And then they started to have the children come to that before and after school program and help to construct what those children wanted. Mm-hmm. It is the most amazing. And the first thing the children said to us was, we asked and they gave us everything. Mm. And so they took care of it because they had been asked what they wanted. And so and they took us around and just were gushing over what they did here and what they did here. And let me show you the quiet place when you're really stressed out. And so they took us to this place, and they had decorated and painted and really helped to care for it. But there was so much, there were fallen tree trunks that they climbed on, and there were rocks that they jumped off of, and there were these bird houses that, if you saw any pictures from Glasgow, we have that. I mean, they were huge, but they were close enough together that the kids could leap from one birdhouse to another birdhouse, and do all sorts of things there. They had a dramatic play area. They had a mud kitchen. They had the quiet games that you could play. So they all had them in these little plastic rainproof bags that the children could just go get off of a hook and go and do whatever it was that they wanted to. But it was amazing the joy they had in taking us around and showing it to us. And they said, sometimes, because the staff were trauma informed, sometimes we need some help. And so we know who we can go to. But it was independent. No one told them what to do, where to go, how long to stay there. And they were in nature. And that's what was so beautiful.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's funny. It's just the simplicity of it, right? It doesn't have to be complicated and it doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to be thoughtful,
hmm,
you know? And I think once the kids have that sense of ownership and empowerment, it changes everything.
it
And
does.
and respect. I think it's the respect too, because I think a lot of stuff might come to the kids as oh, they're just so there's such a handful, it's too much, such a behavioral headache, and on and on and on. And it's like, but that's not their fault.
Right.
Right there's and I think that has also again sewn into the history of the word recess is it's the least favored duty of the day. And I think, you know, with some thought, we could change that, right?
Absolutely.
Especially now with the science behind play. And I think too, schools add that extra level of complexity in that, well, how does this relate to learning?
Mm,
Schools, the purpose of school is learning. So how does recess really relate to learning? And I mean, we know there's
we know
incredible amount
that.
of research to support it.
Right.
But I think that we still need to talk again more and more about the links to learning and particularly school engagement.
Hmm.
And I always like to say, you know, like bullying is a good example because um, you know, if you're being bullied, you do not want to go to school,
Right.
right? And the opposite is true, is when you feel thoroughly connected with your friends, your classmates, you can't wait to get up in the morning and go to school. Nobody really gets up in the morning to go to math class, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to be honest about that. And it is a community, and those people matter, and that life matters. And I think a lot of that life is happening on the schoolyard, right? It's why, you know, you hear this sort of, you know, sometimes we consider it a rite of passage that you just have to sort of negotiate all that stuff on the schoolyard.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but no, yeah, it's like, and we can change it. We have
You
such
could
an
change it.
incredible opportunity to change it. And equity as well, I think is a really big issue because as we're speaking here, we're saying we fundraise for this, the PTA does this, the school council does this. And it's like, that's how it gets funded. It's
Hmm.
not considered part of, you know,
Hmm.
the entire landscape of the whole school.
Yeah. Right.
It's considered trivial. Even that, you know, the fact that the PTA has to come up with the money says in and of itself, it's trivial. It's not part of the purpose of schooling. And so from an equity lens, it's such a big deal because there are a lot of, you know, low income communities that cannot come up. They don't have the wherewithal to come up with any kind of money to do it. I've even had some amazing schools that are high income areas and they will fundraise for the low income schools that don't have anything. And
Well, and I think the other thing that Lindsay's experience pointed out with equity is that leadership in a school
Mm-hmm.
makes a difference.
mhm,
You know, I've seen it also here in Cincinnati. We have I think it's 33 elementary schools, and I worked with two in 1 year on in very different communities and very and then since worked with other schools. Who leads the building matters, and you know, principals, at least in Ohio, principals have their budget for the school. So the
Hmm.
principal that decides that they're going to take their $2,000 and just have it be that's just the cost of doing business for recess and play in our school, and or even telling the PE teacher, hey, order extra every year, put it in your budget. However that ends up happening, you know, the schools down the street or across town is not making that same decision with their budget. So
Hmm.
I think there's this systemic idea that recess is for you all to figure out on your own, which
Hmm.
lends to my attitude as leader, my teacher's attitudes about it, um, and then also the financial reality of it. And then layer on top of that, kids who come from under-resourced areas often are the kids who are coming with higher numbers of adverse child experiences, higher levels of trauma, parents who are less equipped to deal with that, and who
Hmm.
need more robust experiences with play and peer engagement that are supportive to mitigate those things. It's like it's such a cycle of more need, less resource creates more need.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And no one has yet, I mean, really, we've made that connection, but it doesn't seem like that has lifted to principals and to teachers that all the third graders are not 30 third graders. They're 30 individuals who walk into your classroom, different levels of development, at different experiences that are going to strengthen your classroom if you do it well, and are going to destroy your classroom if you don't. And here's some things to do, right? So here's the mitigating things that you can implement in your program. And one is you develop relationships and you get to know where they are developmentally, so that you know how to scaffold them and know what their needs are. But it's so overwhelming to have a group of 30. I mean, I had 24-year-olds and it was overwhelming.
Wow.
But you also have to have time to observe them and figure out where they are. And if you're teacher directed large group instruction all day long, you don't have that time. And so again, we put these barriers into teachers' expectations that you have to do, your 160 minutes of math and your 160 minutes of language arts. And you have to get all that in. So make sure you do that. And it needs to be this program or this application.
Yep.
And it's just the expectations. They can't get to know their kids, which is what would help with those test scores, in addition to taking their kids outside. So again, we have to get back to what is it that they're worried about and what solutions can we provide them with the evidence that it works, so that we can convince more and more of them.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive to a lot of people. But the more play that they have, the higher their test scores are going to be, right?
Yeah.
Because they're happier, they're calmer, they're more connected, and they feel good. And when they feel good, they study better.
Right.
And, and they engage more in the classroom. They're not afraid they're going to be bullied after for making a comment in the classroom. And it all just sort of blends in together. And so I like to say that it does seem counterintuitive to a lot of people, but it's just trust in it. That's actually what we have the research backing us up to say that now. So yeah, so I just love this conversation. It's really fantastic.
I
Really
I
great.
think
Thank you.
too, like the when I was pitching for a playground in my city, I spent time with one of our local senators, and I was walking him through this green space, and I was telling him this is the last bit of green space my little city has, and they're going to put pavilions up in this green space. They want to have 3 different pavilions, maybe 4, and then they want to build bathrooms on the same part of green space. And he stopped and he looked at me, and we were in the pouring rain looking at this piece of property, and he said, that's the problem, is that cities think that unused green space is a waste. And they don't realize that once it's gone, it's gone. And no one's understanding the value of it. They're just seeing what the bigger goal is. Right. And I feel it's the same way with recess, because there's not a dollar amount tied to it. People forget that there's a value to it. And until we can start to show people that value again and remind them of how important it is, we're just going to keep having the same argument when it comes to schools, until we can really change the whole mindset around it again.
Yes. And granted, it takes time, but my goodness, why is it taking so long? Oh, so
But that's the question. That's the question that we really need to understand, is why, what's getting in the way.
Right.
We
Yeah.
really need to understand that. And so it's, when you put programming in without understanding why is this not working, it would be so much easier to find out what the problem is first,
Mhm.
and then develop the solutions.
Well, and I also think that especially those principals that are bought in, principals talking to principals might be more effective than you or me talking to a principal, right? They need to hear. And I was just thinking of the little videos that you could do with those principals who are bought in, who could you could then say, oh, this is a barrier. Oh, here, let's look at this. And here's some solutions to that barrier so that they have a solution that has been tested and tried by a colleague that has worked. So, you know, there's so many tools in our toolbox. Sometimes we just don't know which one to use first. Asking the children what they want on their playground might also be a great place to start so that they take care of it better, right? So and I love the idea of each classroom having one thing that they're, in charge of. In preschool, when everybody's overwhelmed because it's time to clean up, you go to the group that's been playing in blocks and said, who wants to pick up the square blocks and who wants to pick up the rectangle blocks and who wants to, you break it down for them. Otherwise it's so overwhelming. And the same thing happens outside on the playground when you say it's time to clean up and they're like, oh my God, I don't know where to start. You break it down. So everybody has a responsibility. What a smart person who figured that out.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Lauren. This has been wonderful. Cathy, all of your friends can come on at any point in time in Porch Play Chats to have these conversations, because it is when we can focus on a particular topic and we have the research behind it and we have the experts on, people take those as they're listening to the Porch Play Chats and they say, oh, we should try that. Oh, that's something we could try. And it's helpful to those who listen that it just gives them more and more ideas. So thank you so much. Stay right there while I close this out. To learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.